Here I am again, sitting outside my therapy room so I get mobile phone reception. There you go, you can see it in the background there. So I wanted to talk to you today about Caveman Rule number 2. We've talked about Caveman Rule number 1, let's talk about Caveman Rule number 2 for a moment. So, second rule of survival, that your brain uses during childhood to learn lessons to protect you when you're an adult, comes from that thing where, you know how when an animal's born, if it doesn't bond with its mother, it won't survive. So in the animal kingdom, we need to bond with our mothers to survive. And this is also true as far as our subconscious is concerned of us when we are growing up as kids. And it's expanded because every rule is expanded a little bit, but not enough to really take account of the change in modern society. So what happens is now we are genetically programmed to connect everything that happens to are we loved more or are we loved less as a result of our behaviour. So let me give you a fairly general example. Let's say you're 8 years old and you're sat at your kitchen table doing your homework and your dad comes home from work and you're stuck on a question, so you go, "Dad, I'm really stuck on this question, can you help me?" And your dad goes, "Oh, for God's sake, I've only just got in through the door, can't you do anything on your own for once?" And off he stomps. And because we need to connect everything to meaning something and learning something about our behaviour, you might think, all right, okay, I asked my dad for help and he shouted at me. Him shouting at me means he doesn't love me, because that's what connection is. And therefore I have to learn something, so the thing I learn is don't ask for help. And you go on through life and then you become an adult and you just struggle on by stuff and you have no idea why. You just never really reach out and ask anybody because it doesn't feel right. Now the crazy thing about this is, if you'd left him half an hour after coming in the door, he probably would have had no problem helping you. He'd probably had a really long day at work. And the fact that he shouted at you didn't mean he didn't love you, it just meant that he was a bit grumpy after a long day at work. But because our brain is too primitive to understand the difference, it's looking to make connections. And so you can end up with a rule that should never have been there in the first place. Another example that I think lots of people relate to, let's say you were 6 years old, running along the road, as you do when you're 6 years old, because you run everywhere, and you trip up and you hurt your knee. And your mother gives you a sweet to say to stop you crying because you're hurting. And you go, oh, right, okay, so I hurt myself and my mum gave me a sweet, and that means she loves me because she gave me a sweet to stop me hurting. So what do I do when I'm an adult and I need to feel loved? I eat sweets because it makes me feel better. So these simple miscalculations are happening based on a need to feel that we have to change our behaviour in order to get the love of those who care for us. So the way it's adapted is it's based on mothers and fathers. Even applies to grandparents. These rules can go in place. Now, this isn't about the big traumatic stuff. It never is. The rules, there's nothing to learn from the really rotten stuff that happens. The only things to learn are where we feel we can change our behaviour in order to survive better as adults, or your subconscious feels. And your subconscious, remember, is primitive and stupid and emotional and all those things. So it learns lessons based on the subtle things, the small moments where it goes, oh, right, okay, that must mean that I'm not loved as much or I'm loved more. Let's say your mother always gave you extra helpings at dinner time, and now your mother's dead, and every time you eat you just remember, you pile your plate up because you remember how lovely it was that your mother cared about you so much. And it's not true. She cared about you in lots of different ways, and there were lots of other ways, but your brain is too primitive to be able to pick up on subtle things. If you had a totally rubbish childhood and you had very violent parents, one or the other, or some sort of abuse going on, there's nothing to learn about your behaviour. It's quite obvious that there's something going on with them, so you don't end up with the rule in your rule book. So the second rule of survival is, if your mother doesn't love you, then you're going to die. And that's why we can end up with a whole bunch of stuff where we are trying to make up for the fact that there's something wrong with us because we feel we weren't loved, based on very small miscalculations. And like with every rule, it's just a matter of going back and finding the moment at which the rule was put in your rule book and looking at it differently. Because if you look back and you fell over and scuffed your knee and your mother gave you a sweet, was that because she loved you? Sort of. But there were lots of other things that proved that she loved you. It wasn't the food that meant she loved you, it was the act of looking after you and caring for you that meant she loved you. So being able to see it differently allows you to let go of the rule that connects food to being loved. Same with the homework thing. Looking back on it and seeing that your dad had a rough day at work and that he didn't shout at you because he didn't love you, he just shouted at you because he'd had a rough day at work, and you can now understand that as an adult, that also loses that rule. So it's very easy to get rid of the rules, and without the rules, in your day-to-day life, you don't have your behaviour. So that's Caveman Rule number 2. We'll cover Caveman Rule number 3 at some point in the future.